Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Hannah, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Well, good morning to you, and thanks for having me on the program.
Oh, I know we're going to have a wonderful conversation. I'm so looking forward to hearing about you and your career, and specifically talking about fairness at work and what it is we want out of work. But before we get to all of that, I would like to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
The first job I ever had. Oh my goodness, I'm really going to date myself. It was testing out computers, believe it or not. So it was just, entering a bunch of stuff to make sure that it worked. It was a summer job. And it was interesting because people were also kind of making up transactions to try and, turn it into a game. So it got pretty amusing.
What was the environment like the management? Were there a bunch of people, or was it just sort of you in front of a computer?
No, there were a group of people. It was almost like a warehouse setting, is what
Mm,
I can remember. I mean, I was in high school at the time, um, and it was very casual because there wasn't any particular structure. Is really about, um, can the machines work and be consistent and that type of thing. So it wasn't terribly demanding, and it was just nice to have a little paycheck.
Sounds like a nice way to ease your way into the world of work. So,
Yeah.
after high school, did you go to university?
Yes, I did. I went to Duke University in North Carolina, and then I went to Cornell and got an MBA, and then ultimately to law school at Rutgers, where I still qualified for in-state tuition. So that was a really good thing, even back then.
In undergrad, did you major in business, or what was your major?
Well, my major was political science and economics.
Mm.
And, it's funny that you mentioned business because I actually grew up in an entrepreneurial, and I remember how it basically intruded on weekends and evenings and holidays, and I was not a at all. I wanted to get away from it. I really had a great interest in international affairs, international relations, and I thought I would pursue politics. Um, not necessarily, running for office or something like that, but to serve in some type of administrative capacity, a policy capacity. And then I did spend a little time in Washington, and decided it was not for me. Um, but it's funny because when I went and got my business degree, it really started out as a master's in public administration. Yeah, and following through on the international interest. And then when I got there, I discovered that all they talked about was the three branches of government, which is like, okay, not really what I had in mind. And I was taking all the same core courses as the MBAs, and you were allowed to switch by signing a piece of paper. So I'm like, okay, tired of explaining what that P stood for. I'll get the B. Everybody knows what that means. And it worked out well. And actually, it helped me tremendously when practicing law, because with my entrepreneurial background, having learned a lot at the kitchen table from that, um, buttressed by the MBA, it was a lot easier in speaking with clients from the business side to really marry it with the legal to say, okay, what are you really trying to accomplish? Let's find the best way to get there that's not necessarily going to, cause more risk and sleepless nights than necessary. It's like a 4 or 5 lane highway. There's
Yeah.
multiple ways to do it. You've got one idea that can work, but maybe there's a better way that's a little less risky and can still get you what you want. So that worked out really well.
It really does sound like a great marriage of you've got people in front of you who have these real problems, and you've got, what the law or what's available legally, but thinking about it from their perspective of either if they're business owners or just working people, right? We're all
Yeah,
working,
yeah.
and all those real world concerns. And so marrying sort of the what's possible versus what's practical, or what is the quality of the life that you want to have, and therefore exploring those options with clients.
Absolutely, absolutely. And being able to think ahead and having them see around the corners
Mm.
about, what the legal ramifications of certain things would be, because they don't understand sometimes what the risks are.
Mhm.
Um, And that's okay. That was my job to explain so that they could make more informed decisions. That's what it's all about.
So why did you got your MBA, but then why did you go for the JD? Why did you decide to do law?
It was always kind of in the background and what I wanted to pursue. And I knew that I wanted to combine it with some kind of a joint degree. It just wasn't initially the MBA, but worked out. I mean, career paths are not necessarily linear. They kind of zig and zag. And then at the end, you look and go, oh, that's how those puzzle pieces fit together. It makes a lot of sense now. And you learn something at each step of the way, and hopefully you build on it. And, you create something unique, which I felt I did because I also realized that a lot of the lawyers that I worked with didn't understand business and understand things like inventory costs, why you don't just want to have a bunch of stuff in a warehouse, supply chain, how distribution works, market segmentation, things that business people take for granted. And they're like, I don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
how are they supposed to? That's not what they teach. I had a really interesting conversation one time with a dentist, and they were going to open a second office for pediatric dentistry. And she was talking about her experience with employees and how they hired this one um, Korean dentist, but he was terrible with patients. So she had to let him go. Things like that happen. She goes, now I'm not going to hire any more Koreans. And I'm like, really? And I was telling people that this at a presentation one time, and I could hear the gasps in the room,
Yeah.
people that had HR experience. And the thing is, this woman was Filipino, right? Very smart, very accomplished. And I said, and how would you feel if somebody said, I'm not hiring any more Filipinos? She goes, well, that's unfair. I'm like, there you go.
Yeah.
And what you just described is also illegal, just to make this blanket, statement based on nationality and origin. And so, it was just a really interesting conversation. She's like, well, how am I supposed to know that? And I'm like, that's a really good question,
Mhm.
because in going through school, obviously very bright, dental school, but where do they teach something like that for
Mhm.
someone who wants to open um, a dental practice or an engineer who wants to open up their own business or an
Mhm.
architect or whatever? That people learn through the school of hard knocks, and too often they'll hire a lawyer who help them with a speeding ticket, and it's like, well, but this is not their area of expertise.
Mhm.
Practices get kind of fragmented. So it's just really interesting about, this disconnect, and being able to bridge it. So that was very rewarding.
Yeah, also just an ode for anybody who, even if you're not going to start your own business, you are working in a business, right? Everything's going to have to make money in some way or to stay afloat. And so to be a valuable player, to understand all the pieces. And so when you think about an initiative or how to best meet client needs or innovate, if you don't really have a real world practical understanding of means of distribution and just all of the different sorts of factors, you're not going to be as valuable. It's not going to be as helpful as you might imagine because you just don't know, right? And so
Right.
those basic sorts of skills, it's almost like knowing how to do your taxes. We're all in business in some way or another, whether it's for profit or not. So having those basic skills, really, everybody probably needs to have those sorts of 101 understandings so that we can
Yeah,
have more shared expectations. And as you know, expectations are king when it comes to healthy work environments.
very much so. Very much so.
So just a little bit more on this. So you practiced law. What kind of law did you practice?
Well, I would consider myself a corporate generalist. So as an issue spotter, whether it's an employment issue, a contract issue, an antitrust issue, a regulatory issue. I worked in a number of regulated industries. And so being able to work closely with management, being able to spot an issue before it blows up
Mhm.
is really valuable.
Mhm.
And so it was really very rewarding to work with those managers that wanted to know as compared to those who were like, oh, legal has no tattoo to their forehead, and I'm just not going to bother because I know better. Yeah, those kind of blew up.
Right.
um, but it was really good to be able to have that kind of joint problem solving
Mhm.
instead of here's what I want to do. No, go back to the drawing board, which I know some lawyers do.
Mhm.
And it could also be because they just don't have enough of a background to um, to do that kind of joint problem solving, to ask the right questions. You mentioned people need to have sort of that 101 understanding, and it's hard to just you can't know everything.
Of
Nobody
course
does.
not. Right.
But it is good to be able to ask questions and have the humility to recognize, okay, I don't know what the latest thinking is, or even if this is an issue, if it is, fine. If it's not, we'll move on. But to be able to ask questions, that is so, so important to avoid conflict.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think this curiosity, it just goes so far. Humility, as you said, curiosity,
Hmm.
wanting to partner with, right? And so a lot of the question is, what do we see our job as doing? Am I just this one thing, or am I a part of a team? Am I a part of a community? And I've got my individual goal, my team goals, the goals of the organization. And if I really understand my place in all of those, then, and and the expectation to be collaborative, then I'm going to approach work in a different kind of way. And so a lot of the question is, what is the culture like? What is expected? And whether or not the culture is collaborative, who am I as a professional? How am I showing up? And how do I want to affect for good the organization and the team in which I'm around?
You put your finger on a very important word, collaboration. And I would take that even one step further to say, is collaboration rewarded?
Hmm.
As opposed to somebody who wants to grandstand and be the individual star. And it's like, oh, that's so wonderful. Well, now you just set up an us versus them type of dynamic,
Mhm.
instead of encouraging that star who may have terrific skills, in a number of ways to help raise everybody else up as well so that they all can benefit. So it's really incumbent on team leaders to not just talk about collaboration, it's a lovely word, but also to put some teeth behind it, so that when people truly are collaborating, it is recognized, it's rewarded, and it encourages more of the same behavior.
That's such an excellent point because as you were talking, I was just thinking about um, like end of year awards. We award
Mhm.
this person, we award, and it's always like individuals. And so, for the most part, sometimes we might say this team, but it's never the prize. Like the prize is the individual's contribution. And I mean, we live in the West, especially in America, a very individualistic culture, which just is the way that it is. And yet, if we truly prize collaboration, it's an excellent point. How do we how are we really showing that, right? How do our awards, our financial structures, our promotions, how is it so that we do both? Because it's important to us in America and this kind of culture to look at what the individual is doing, but also look at the team. So if you want both, how are you going to do that?
Right, right. The overall incentive structure. Where is it? What's being rewarded?
Mhm.
Um, Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be financial reward. I mean, it
Mhm.
can be, as you say, those individual rewards. Um, but, the thing is, if the team were to say, so and so really led us, so and so deserves the extra mile, that's another story. But
Yes.
again, it's that sense of us. We're in this together, as opposed to, yeah, I'm better than you.
Mhm.
Yeah. And here's my award that says so.
Yes. I'm of two minds of awards, right? So the culture of every kid played soccer, so everybody gets an award. I mean, what does the award mean?
Right.
And also just picking out the star from a vast amount of people. I just wonder. I wonder if it's really doing what it is that we want it to do. What is the message? I don't know. I mean, but in business, right? There is an organization that's winning insofar as they are getting their message across or doing what it is they want or making the most money. And so there is that nature of something has been accomplished and so it's rewarded. However, it might be with power, money, recognition, accomplishing your goal, right? So I'm not quite so sure. Like, how do we balance all of those things out?
Well, I'm not saying that it's easy.
Right.
But a good team, I mean, think about sports teams, for
Mhm.
example, right? I mean, each player has a specific role, and they have that specific role because of their athletic prowess in that particular area.
Mhm.
And a business, in a way, a well-run team, I should say, is the same thing. You can't have everybody, being the star hitter. It was like, okay, well, who's going to do the rest, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to recognize and appreciate each individual role, regardless of where they are in the power structure. I
Hmm.
mean, even the mailroom plays an important role. Let's not forget.
That's right.
And to respect that. I mean, in the theater, there's a saying there are no small parts, only
Hmm.
small actors, because if the
Hmm.
part wasn't important, it wouldn't be there. It'd be written out.
Hmm.
So I think that's important to recognize and to respect, because even respecting somebody, how you speak to them, your body language, how you treat them, um, they all send signals about recognition. I
Hmm.
see you, I hear you, I appreciate your input. May not always agree with you, and that's okay.
Hmm.
All right. Let me explain why I don't agree, and maybe we can build on that and you can convince me, or vice versa, or there's something you can tell me I didn't know because you're closer to the problem and the situation than I am. So it's really about valuing everyone for their strengths
Hmm.
and and hopefully the other team complements their weaknesses so that altogether you've got a really good team.
Yeah, I think that's really evocative when we think about every part, the mailroom. I mean, the cleaning staff, if they go on strike or don't show up, it's a problem. One
Yeah,
day, it's a problem. And that goes to what does it feel like to be here? And what does it feel like to be seen? What does it feel like to be a contributor, a member of a particular community? It's always how it feels it's how it feels there, right? And so it doesn't matter necessarily when we're talking about like how it feels from the outside, what somebody else might see, but what does the team feel because of the practices, the habitual practices, because of not just something written on the wall, that's neither here nor there, but how is it lived out in the everyday? And that is it grows, right? Just like the more love you give, the more love you get. It grows, and the more you feel like you're wanted, the more you want to be there, and the more you want. It just this real, for lack of a better word, kind of synergy that happens, and you know it when you have it because you feel it, and you know when it's lacking because
right.
those
Yeah,
questions: do they even want me here?
absolutely. It's a trust factor. That generates a loyalty factor to say, yeah, I want to work with these people, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Mhm.
I have this idea. Let's bounce it around. It very much has to do with that, and so much of it isn't, as you said, the words on the wall. It's living them, and sometimes the unwritten rules undermine them.
Yes.
They say one thing, but in reality, something else is happening, and people definitely sense it. It impacts their sense of safety, psychological safety, and their willingness to come forward with a problem, never mind with an idea, because they're afraid they're going to get shot down.
Yes, absolutely, right. It's not what people say, it's what they do and how you feel around them, right? How do I feel around this person? If the boss says, we have psychological safety here now, it's like, what, what? What are you talking about? That's not how it works. You have it because
Right,
people feel it,
right.
because of what it feels like to be here and what has been shown to me and all of that that goes along. And just to go back to our talk about collaboration, we can say, let's collaborate here, but as you know, in so many organizations, the structure is set up to pit different parts, sales against marketing, or this against that, or just even within teams, like how we look at our numbers. So, or how we share resources, right? So we're fighting for, we have to put our argument for, and so it pits people structurally against one another that we're told to collapse those walls and collaborate with. And so there are not easy, but easier things to, if we can get structures right, then that can ease the flow of something like collaboration or something like we're all on this team together, every part plays a part by really taking a step back and say, what are the barriers or how we've got this set up going away from what our goal is.
Yeah, those are really good points. And I think that in my experience, one thing that helps is to look at the ultimate goal for the organization.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing for, sort of the lower levels to pit each other against each other, but I think what the next level leadership needs to say is, okay, I hear what you're proposing. They don't sound like they're in sync with each other, but how is each of these advancing our ultimate goal?
Yeah.
Which one gets us there faster or economically, further, whatever? And because maybe it's not about a zero-sum game of doing one versus the other. Maybe
Mhm.
it's we do this one first and then this one, because this one can build more on top of this one than doing that one first. I mean, it really goes about trying to find the common denominator and the value that we're not fighting each other. We're all together fighting for the organization, for our mission, for our customers, for our products, our services, to make the best in terms of what we're contributing to the world. Because ultimately, who needs the product or service if there's no demand for it, right?
Right.
So ultimately, that's what we're going for, to find that common thread instead of just conflict, because
Yeah.
that doesn't really serve anybody in the long term. It's about untangling that.
Absolutely. And I think so often we can just get so enmeshed in the details of the day and the thing that I'm specifically trying to accomplish within my team, and we forget what is our company or organization trying to achieve? What is our mission? What are we doing? And it's a relatively simple ask for all levels of leadership to make that a mantra. Whenever they're having a meeting, remind everybody this is we're all in this together. We're all going to the same location. We're all trying to accomplish this, and we need everybody. And so the more I think that way, the more I'm thinking we're this team and that team, we're working on different parts, but we're all trying to achieve the same thing. And when you succeed, I succeed because there's more revenue or there's more buy-in or there's more customers or there's more awareness, and that allows me to do my part even better. And so this idea that we're for each other because we're all trying to accomplish this mission, it seems to me like it's a relatively simple boots on the ground thing that could be done, but it really isn't done that often in my experience.
You're right, because what we're talking about is this grand 10-foot, 10,000-foot level concept, which and who's going to argue with that? Okay.
Right.
But then you get down to the ground and it's like, oh, that person pisses me off. Oh, they looked at me cross-eyed. Oh, they did this. Did you take that out of the refrigerator? That was mine. These little personal
Yes.
interactions
Yes.
that cause friction.
Yes.
you know, that's where I think leadership is really frustrated. Like
Yes.
cut it out, go to your room, go to the corner, stop it,
Mm,
don't make me stop the car, that type of thinking.
yeah.
Um, and that's difficult.
Mhm.
You know, I think the key would be to stop it before it escalates.
Mhm.
And that's not easy. I mean, I think that takes some leadership training to sort of recognize, these little red flags. Maybe they're pink, they're not totally red yet, but they can turn red.
Right.
Um, and to try and have a conversation uh, with people individually and together to solve it. Don't expect them to solve it. That to me is the biggest cop out I've seen leaders do. And,
Mm,
oh, those two are fighting. Oh, it's a cat fight. Isn't that cute? No, it's not cute.
no.
And it's undermining morale in the team. Everybody
Mhm.
notices they're not, blind. They see it, they feel it. Um, and they also see your cowardice and lack of leadership in addressing it.
Mm.
So cut it out. That's my
I mean,
advice.
100%, 100%. And, this idea when you're up here and you're more in the, the leadership and you're doing the strategy and you're going forward and you think, oh, they just should not be doing that. It's sort of this wish fulfillment. Oh, they should just get it together. It's not that important. Well, maybe it's not that important to you, but that's neither here nor there. If the people who are doing the work, it's important to them and it's taking them off mission, and now they're squabbling with one another, that should be it should be a high priority. What's going on with your employees? Because we want to set them up for success, because that's setting us up for success, all of us.
Right,
So,
right.
as you do in the small, as you care about the temperature in the office and who gets to control it, as you care about the break room and who's supposed to be cleaning that, as you care about parking spots, all of the day to day, right? Which goes to, I want to talk about your book because it's about fairness. I think it really has to do so much with people not really talking and taking that seriously and that we have different understandings of it. So let's talk about fairness. But so your new book, Seeking Fairness at Work, Cracking the New Code of Greater Employee Engagement, Retention, and Satisfaction. So before we talk about what's in it, how did it come about? Why did you decide to write it and why now?
Why now? Um, I decided to write it because I thought it was a message that needed to be sent. That there's a disconnect, as you've been pointing out. I mean, you teed this up beautifully. Thank you. There's a disconnect between what management often thinks should be happening and what is happening with the boots on the ground, so to speak. Um, and it's messy, and they feel like they don't want to deal with it because it is messy and
Mhm.
emotional. You know,
Mhm.
somebody might break down and cry, or somebody might slam a book or a file on the desk and walk out in a fit. There's conflict, and and there's different levels of conflict. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in your work. It's sort of like this low grade fever, and then it just kind
Mhm.
of can escalate
Mhm.
until something really blows up.
Mhm.
And people see it, people feel it, and it misdirects energy that could
Mhm.
otherwise go towards the mission, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's counterproductive. And in terms of asset management, it's poor asset management because your people, everybody says, oh, people are the biggest asset. Yeah, they are. They
Mhm.
truly are because employees can grow in terms of their knowledge and capability to do more than anything else. So it is important to keep them engaged. And when things happen that threaten engagement, like conflict, there needs to be accountability. And that's where management really needs to step in. So, I mean, sitting behind a desk dealing with legal issues, yeah, it boiled down to accountability.
Mhm.
What does the law say? What do you want to try to accomplish? How do you navigate between the two? And especially with employment issues, um, I saw people that had legitimate employment issues, not necessarily things that crossed a legal line,
Mhm.
but things that basically felt horribly unfair.
Mhm.
And if I said, well, I don't have the solution for that, it's really an HR issue. The comments that hurt me the most were when people said, I can't go to HR because it'll get back to my boss and they'll retaliate. To me, that was just such a cultural disconnect
Yeah.
that there was a problem that had to be hidden because of a fear of unfairness,
Yeah.
you know? And basically, if you boil down any kind of a loss, comes down to unfairness, either a misunderstanding of the facts, a misunderstanding of the law and how it operates, where people feel a sense of injustice. And so a lot comes down to, all right, how do you manage those expectations? Now, in
Mhm.
the legal setting, here's the law, here's what
Right.
you can and can't do. Okay, there may be some gray areas, but you've got a framework. When it comes to human relationships, um, it can get a lot messier because you don't have written contracts.
Mhm.
You have um, expectations that come from who knows where.
Yeah.
They can come from your past work experience, from your family experience, your ethnic cultural experience, your religious experiences. So there's all kinds of mixes about like what does respect look like? It looks
Mhm.
like different things to different people. Um, and how people communicate, the messages that they send, how nonverbal messages are interpreted, body language is interpreted. And so that's where it gets dicey, and that's why I think it's so important for managers to understand um, sort of this social contract, and
Mhm.
like any contract, pieces to it. The first is acting in good faith. So are we being honest? It's pretty simple,
Mhm.
and how often do people spin information or gaslight? Oh, no, you're just imagining things. You're too sensitive. That type of thing. You just want to smack them. I'll give you a sensitive. Can you feel that? All right. Um, it as you said before, to the people experiencing it, it's very real
Yeah.
and it's stressful.
Mhm.
And if the stress persists for a really long period of time and it conflicts with their core values,
Mhm.
um, it's PSTD. It doesn't necessarily have to all be in the military. It's not.
Right.
People in the medical profession experience that during COVID.
Mhm.
And so it's that constant stress where, the slightest thing, if you hear somebody's footsteps in the hall. Oh, I know who that is. Or you hear that voice. Oh, I know who that is. I mean, it just floods you with
Yes.
cortisol. I mean, you just fight or flight. You don't know, I'm going to dive under my desk or cubicle.
Mhm.
Where are you going to go?
Mhm.
Um, those things can be stressful. So, honesty, number one. Are we being honest? And I think sometimes going back to what we said earlier about having the humility to understand and recognize, to know what you don't know
Yeah.
and ask the questions. And, that goes a long, long way because, sometimes people are saying, how can they be so stupid to do X, Y, Z? Don't they realize this? No, they don't. Or they want to be blind to it.
Yeah.
It's a different thing. Anyhow, I saw a lot of unfairness happening and I just wanted to untangle it
Mhm.
because I felt like employees had valid feelings, they were
Mhm.
being invalidated, and yet management had some issues too. I mean, I can see them sitting there saying, can't they just do their jobs? Why,
Right.
why, why is this so hard? Just do your job. And it's
Right.
like, yeah, you want them to do their job, but for high employee engagement, you want them to go that extra, to come to you and say, I've got an idea. What do you think of that? If they're just doing their job,
Yeah.
then, they're just typing that keyboard and testing that computer, whatever the it is. They're doing the minimum to keep their job, maybe
Mhm.
doing it really well, but
Mhm.
you're not getting that extra discretionary effort, which everybody talks about, which has been quantified by, all kinds of people for the value that it brings to the bottom line,
Yeah.
in terms of productivity and in terms of innovation.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. Let's stay on this idea of good faith, because you hear a lot about like what do workers want? They want transparency. They want to
mhm,
know what's going on,
right.
and if the company is contracting, telling people before they're laid off in a mass email or a mass Zoom or individually, right? To know what's going on, so that people can set their expectations. And I think a lot of this goes to treating adults as adults. So there's a bit of an infantilization that happens in work environments where you have these hierarchy, and with power you become maybe more of a person, or more, you do have a certain kind of say, of course, but this real desire for everyday employees to know appropriately what can be known and what can be shared. And when it goes to fairness within a group, a lot of it is, why does that person get this? Why is he getting this extra thing and I'm not? Why is she getting to go early and I'm not? It doesn't seem fair.
Hmm.
So
Right.
how do you see that, those everyday sorts of, that's not a fair practice. The manager's not being fair. But first, how do you understand fairness? What is fairness?
Fairness is about meeting reasonable expectations on both sides of the desk,
Mm,
and the social contract, like every contract, whether it's written or implied, doesn't matter. There's an expectation, a covenant, actually, of good faith
mm,
and one of fair dealing. And in the workplace, basically, it means we're not going to get in each other's way. You're going
mm.
to give me what I need to succeed in this job. Now, that doesn't mean getting promoted next week to the corner office, okay?
Right.
I mean, we're talking about reasonable expectations.
Reasonable. Hmm.
Okay. It means giving me timely instruction, reasonable expectations or reasonable goals, not impossible ones that set me up to fail, because that's going to really piss me off. Why? Because it's not fair. It's not
Hmm.
achievable. Um, and including me in the things that need to be included so I can succeed and we all can succeed, which is, what we talked about earlier. But how many times have there been meetings where somebody who should be there isn't, or somebody who should be there and is there but isn't allowed to speak, or somebody else is taking up all the oxygen in the room with what they have to say. They're not listening. I mean, the covenants get broken in so many ways um, by the unwritten rules.
Hmm.
That's what I focus on in seeking fairness at work. Those unwritten rules fall into five general categories. Each one is like its own little rabbit hole, but there are five general categories. And one is approachability.
Hmm.
You know, um, how do you know when you can talk to your manager
Hmm.
or whoever the higher up is? Are they traveling all the time? Do they not like emails, or do they respond to your text with an email, or vice versa? You have your communications are crossed. When you walk into their office, uh, you know, are they holding their pen like, oh, you've just interrupted me? Like, how quick can we make this?
Mhm.
What is the body language? What is their tone when they're communicating? And there's so many different ways that we can communicate. Yeah, let's talk, right? As opposed to, yeah, okay, what? Now what? I know and it's were the words bad? No, they weren't bad, but it was the tone, it was the body language, it was the whole thing. So
Mhm.
approachability, so that you can ask for what you need, so that
Mhm.
you can ask questions, um, and get the information and the resources to be successful. Because not having that communication, I mean, if you did that to a vendor and then they gave you the wrong product or the wrong quantity, the wrong shipping date or something like that, well, they tried to reach you, you know? Okay, so approachability is one of them. Lack of recognition is another. If people are passed over, and I'm not talking about for a single promotion, I'm talking about even in meeting. I mean, meetings are just so incredibly powerful for the messages that they send and don't send.
Mhm.
Um, Email chains, whatever social media, electronic media that you use to communicate. Um, Including the right people, how you say it, what you say it, when you say it, 10 minutes before quitting time. Oh, let's have a meeting. Thanks a lot. I'm going to miss my kid's soccer game. I've got dinner planned with the in-laws, on and on. I mean, it's being respectful of other people. If it's a true emergency, it's one thing,
Right.
but recognition in so many ways. And it's not just the bonuses and the raises, or the awards.
Mhm.
It is the day-to-day things
Yeah.
too that make a difference. Do you pass somebody in the hall to say hello? Do you
Mhm.
smile?
Mhm.
Hi, good to see you, that type of thing. Or are they invisible to you? If you're in a hurry and it's, happens occasionally, it's one thing. But all the time, then after a while, it's like, who am I? I'm a number. I don't count. I don't
Mhm.
matter. And
Mhm.
that will cause people. Bias is a huge one. You call on the same people all the time.
Mhm.
Um, Conflict management, which I know
Mhm.
is one of your hot buttons, and rightfully so, because if conflict isn't managed properly,
Mhm.
and you don't have objective standards and you're not consistent in how you apply those standards,
Right.
then, well, that's favoritism. Well, how is that fair? No, it's not, by
Right.
by definition. Workload management is the other one. I mean, it's so easy to say, oh, yeah, that person, they always deliver. I'll just keep assigning them more and more. And then you got the other person saying, yep, I'm leaving at 5.
Right.
See ya.
Right.
And it's like, why am I killing myself? You can
Mhm.
become a victim of your own success.
Mhm.
Um, but, either too much or the timing of it, again, going back to the goals. So those are the 5 basic areas that there are unwritten rules that people learn about. And when they're not, you know, even-handed, it causes perceptions of unfairness. And like you said, people sense it, they
Mhm.
feel it.
Mhm. That's all so strong. And it takes me back to what you said originally about messy and emotional. Like one reason we don't want to get into the fray. Well, you're part of the human community, and being a human is messy and emotional, along with a lot of other sorts of things. And there's a lot that we can do to minimize by having good structures. But having good structures and applying those evenly is good. And at the same time, we have the particularity of the person at this time in their life, in this company, with this market, with this, I mean, like we want to be treated as individuals because we are, and the people we work with and for and around also need that sort of consideration. And so I think this idea of fairness can feel uncomfortable in a society that loves rigid structure. We love a number. Give us a statistic. Give us a proven, evidence-based blah, blah, blah. Like if you can't say that, I don't want to hear it. But when we trick ourselves into thinking that's the only way, I mean, those are important things. But now we're talking about individuals and we're talking about how do I see that person, respect that person, and set the conditions to play the long game so that they feel belonging, so that they feel valued, so that they are to free to innovate, and they have the desire for that discretionary effort, and really see this as a place and a mission they want to be on board. And so if they see themselves that way, and they see themselves professionally valued and growing, then what you're going to get, right? So the ROI is amazing, but more important than that is how do we treat our humans, our fellow humans? We have a moral obligation to treat people well. But it's, I think, very uncomfortable, especially if people are uncomfortable with emotions, their own and others. If they want more cut and dry, everything's applied equally the same. If that's what people understand fairness to be in this very monochromatic sort of way, I think it's that, and there is the cut and dry, and there's the particularity, how we're going to now apply the cut and dry to this particular situation. And that takes a certain level of sophistication and emotional regulation.
You're absolutely right. And in terms of a system, in my experience, it goes to the hiring process to hire managers and promote people into management roles and responsibilities that have a capability. Doesn't mean it's fully developed, but that they're coachable. Because there are some people that it will never hit. And that doesn't mean that they can't be good at their job. It's just a different type of skill set, and they should be in that type of role, not managing people.
Right.
I mean, they can be contributors someplace else and have a really important impact. Um, but it goes to the hiring, and the promoting and making sure that they have the tools to manage highly emotional situations.
Mhm.
And it's one thing to say, yes, we have these rules. And I mean, I saw a wonderful little video about, you know, talk about equality, sort of that strict definition of equality, where I think it was like a first or a kindergarten grade teacher um, told her students, okay, we're going to be equal. And everybody's, yes, 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 we want to all be fair. And she said, okay, so um, she told one of the tall students to write something on the blackboard, and they did, and they could reach it very easily. Then she picked on one of the short ones and said, I want you to write something right next to it. And they couldn't because they were much shorter. She said, would you like a step stool? Yes. Okay, well, is it fair that this person gets a one doesn't? And they were just like sort of perplexed, like, yeah, something, but they realized that different people have different needs, and all that is fine. And going back to your situation with, adult employees and emotional needs, somebody's going through a divorce and needs to get, pick up their kids from school early for some reason. Those are accommodations that can be made in the short term,
Mhm.
but does that mean that it happens all the time? Emergencies come up, and people need to be given a break. And that
Mhm.
and that I think is fair,
Mhm.
because it's demonstrating some empathy. It's
Mhm.
recognizing from where they're sitting, like, my hands are tied. Can you help me? Yes. Okay. But there also comes a point in recognizing that they're going too far. They're
Mhm.
asking for too much. And that's where I think sort of the management regulation, if you will, has to come in to say, I can do X, but I can't do X plus infinity.
Yeah.
Not reasonable to everybody else. They can understand, yeah, there's the occasional accommodation, and it can be short term, however that's defined. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2, 3 months. It depends on the situation. But if you bend too far, then it's going to be like, okay, well, what about my turn?
Mhm.
And an example of that is um, people that work in jobs that require work on holidays.
Mhm.
The folks that have the children, they get to, the first dibs, and the single people are like, well, you can work, you don't have kids. Yeah, but maybe I have other interests. Maybe
Mhm.
I have other family obligations that don't involve children. So how
Mhm.
is it fair that I'm always the one on call? There there has to
Yeah.
be a give and take. If they want to work on that, so to give their coworkers who do have children a break, that's up to them. But if it's
Right.
assumed that they always will, and they're assigned to it, well, then
Yes.
So you have to look at the totality of the circumstances and what's all involved, duration, the frequency, and how burdensome it is.
Absolutely. So when we think about what's a reasonable accommodation, it so matters. What is your job? What is
Right,
your role in the team, right? If you are a nurse, right, and so you're working, you have to have 24-hour staff. That's not a work from home kind of job, unless maybe you're doing records, right? So maybe you're on the same sort of floor, but you don't need to be in person. So within a team that we have different jobs, and therefore what's reasonable and a reasonable accommodation for one may not be a reasonable accommodation for the other. But people who have the same, got 10 nurses and they all are seeing, patients. All right, so now what is going to be the structure here? Could it be that because of my family situation has changed, I can change my shift so that I'm available to pick up or drop off my kids? Well, maybe not, right? It depends on what is their workforce. And so that individual messy component of what's reasonable here, given your job, given what we need to have happen, given if you do this, who is going to have to pick up the slack, if anybody? Because maybe it's
right.
something that you can now do later, and that's the accommodation and that's the workaround, and it works and it makes sense. So you need to be creative.
Hmm.
Both all of us as professionals need to be creative, but the manager, how can I treat everybody well? And when there's a need that comes up, how can we be reasonably flexible and creative so that it makes sense?
Right. And I think that type of approach is also what builds trust,
Mm,
which is so critical because, yeah, something might appear like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right or feel right. But if you trust someone, you'll give them a pass.
yeah.
And and if they screw up, which happens sometimes, they can say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize XYZ. And because of the amount of trust that has been built, it's believable.
Hmm.
It's believable. And you can say, okay, we all make mistakes. And, they recognized it. And that's cool.
Yeah. As you're saying, I was thinking about like trust as trust or not, or mistrust as like this bank that every day we're putting in or taking out. And the everyday can be, I'm having a problem with Sally and you know about it and you're not doing anything. And so every day it's taking away because I think that's your role. Don't you see this? Don't you care? If you don't know about this, what's going on? And this has
Right.
gone on for weeks and months. And so now
Hmm.
you want me to trust you. And I'm like, sorry, you know, why should I? You have
Right.
seen me suffer and not cared. And these narratives that we spin, whether or not this person knows, cares, has been doing something or not, I don't know about it. And so I'm not willing to. But vice versa, if you see that I'm having a problem and you intervene or you set us up for success or have a mediator come or whatever it might be so that we see it before it escalates. As you said, the low level fever. I'm all for conflict prevention as much as we can. If conflict's not the problem, it's when we don't manage it. But what
Right.
can we do to give people the ability to solve their own problems, to talk about their own needs, so that if I see that you rolled your eyes at me at a meeting or talked over me, I can say, afterwards, hey, I noticed you rolled your eyes at me. What's going on? And the person can say, oh no, something in my eye, or "Oh, I really needed to get out of here. Yeah, that was rude. I'm sorry." And then we move on, right? But
Right.
setting everybody up for success so that they feel like they should speak up. And if it goes on, somebody's intervening because they're paying attention.
Right. And a lot of that has to do with empathy and, like you said, awareness of what's going on. And I love the way you put trust as sort of an emotional bank account because it can easily get overdrawn.
Hmm.
And when it is, people will do what they need to do to keep their jobs. But, you know, when management says XYZ, it's like, okay, why now? Why should
Hmm.
I trust you?
Hmm.
I've had this history of doing things that are inconsistent with what you're now proposing, and I'm supposed to believe it. And then it becomes like pushing a mule uphill. It's really, really hard for management to get, that change initiative done.
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't handled well previously. So yeah, trust is one of those things that ebbs and flows. It's part of reputation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it takes a lot to build one, and it can be destroyed like that.
Yeah. And we have a new worker that comes in. It's not like we're starting off scratch, right? Whether or not I'm going to trust you, my colleagues, or the person I'm working for has everything to do with how I was treated, how I was treated other places, other work environments in my home and my relationships, how I think about trust, how I sort of have going about in the world, right? And so we're not all showing up in the same place
Right.
emotionally, with health, with everything else. And so the question is the culture that I'm coming into. What are the signs? What are those green flags? Right? What are those signposts that this is a place that I'm at least comfortable in? Now, we're not going to be able to get everybody to, on the same page. We're not going to be able to maybe win everybody over, so to speak. And yet, that's where we can have the structure in place. What are the non-negotiables about how everybody's going to be treated here? And just because this way you worked in a different place, it was okay to yell or whatever, because that's how things got done. That's not what we're doing here,
Hmm.
right? And so making sure we have those non-negotiables about what is acceptable professional behavior. However, somebody else shows up, if they are um, having issues or they are this bright shining star, what is that expectation of how I'm expected to be treated and I'm expected to treat everybody else? And who's paying attention to when it's going well, right? Hannah, you're doing great. You did this. Or Mary, we just don't do that here for these reasons, is what's going on.
Right, right. And this is where when somebody new comes in, the onboarding process
Yes.
is so, so important. And it starts the second that they accept a job offer.
Yeah.
Even though it may be a couple weeks until they're physically starting the position, but that's when the messages can be sent about how they're being welcomed, how they're being accepted, and then following up not just the first day, but the first couple weeks, and then first couple months. To see how they're really being integrated into the community and into their team, and what questions they have, which is also a great feedback loop for the organization
Mhm.
because the questions can help them then improve their onboarding process about, well, these are things that, we thought they were understanding, but maybe they don't, and how to provide more information.
There's so much that can be learned from a new hire, no matter their age or their experience. But what is their experience here? What are the questions they have? What do they, sometimes people come in and they are dinged because they want to come in and change things, uh, but that is such a wonderful opportunity. What is this person seeing? At least initially, that is jarring or inefficient or outdated. Now, they might come to change their mind, but that's really interesting information to get better.
Right,
If there's a way to listen to that person, harness that information, and help to bring them on to so that they can adjust their expectations. Oh, this is our copier policy for these reasons. I understand why it was restricted or unrestricted there, but this is what we do, and this is the reason behind it. I
right.
mean, little things like that.
Yep. It makes a difference to know why and not
Hmm.
just say, this is the policy, boom, in your
Hmm.
face, but explaining why, um, you know, can really help illuminate an understanding.
Yeah, and align those expectations because we're going to, fairness. If we talk about, I mean, very, very few times, I don't know if I've ever been asked, well, what do you think would be fair here? Right. And it's interesting because we just trick ourselves in thinking, well, we all know what fairness is, and we all have the same ideas of what fairness is. Well, it turns out not to be the case. And the more if I can hear what my colleague thinks, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I might change or amend or find out, well, what is it? What does it mean here now at this time? And it might be different in 6 months or 2 years, but we can have those
Right,
conversations. And whether or not I like it, at least I know what it is. And we're
right.
not going to like everything as a part of work, right?
Yeah,
So you decide to be at a place where you can be, and the more information you have, and the more that's presented to you, the more you can make informed decisions as to this is a place where I can thrive, or these conditions that just I'm going to start looking for someplace else because it's not the best place for me, which means it's not good for them either.
right. And you talk about it in terms of conditions, and I refer to them as the unwritten rules,
Hmm.
which too often organizations don't even realize are there because, well, this is the way we've always done it. It's part of their culture, it's baked in.
Mhm.
But yet, those are the speed bumps that are keeping people from being fully engaged. Um, and as you say, from considering, maybe I don't belong here. This just doesn't feel like the right fit. And, we couch it in those kinds of fuzzy terms. Um, but if we were to unpack that,
Yeah.
we could point to very specific types of behaviors or actions um, that just run counter to the values that are written on the wall, and
Hmm.
certainly the ones that we want to live by.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll do the hard thing and say, well, I need this job, can't move right now,
Sure.
the market, my skill set, whatever the reason is for making it difficult to find another job at the same or better pay level with and benefits and so forth. But people do shut down. They obey and comply, and it's just not that high level of engagement. And if management is okay with that, that's fine. Then stop complaining. It's really kind of that simple. Um, you get what you put in, and if you're not putting in that kind of leadership, which your employees expect and frankly deserve,
Mhm.
then it's what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah. Sustained intentional effort. If you don't have the sustained intentional effort and you're wondering what's going on, but then you look at what am I doing every day?
Yeah,
What is the structure? Now, of course, we can put things in that just automatically, right? It sounds like it takes all this effort. It does take some upfront effort, and some maintenance effort, but you get so much more. I mean, it is so the time you put in, if you're really working towards a healthy work environment, what you get in, you get back. Because so many times employers are dealing with problems that have
right.
been going on too long. So I'm a mediator, I'm an ombuds, and when things have been going on for years. Um, you can deal with them. It's longer, it's more messy, it's complicated, and there's just now more players involved. Harm has been done because things have not been taken care of.
Right.
But if you take care of those things, and so it takes all this time and resources, and heaven forbid a lawsuit, which is very costly in many ways. Um, Many of those things, which would have never come to a lawsuit if someone would have said, I'm sorry, or
Mhm.
listen to that person um, sooner rather than later.
Yeah. But it really requires an appetite for change, and an appetite for being open-minded to maybe hear some things that leadership doesn't want to hear, that may
Mhm.
be difficult to hear, in order to make the necessary changes. So, if they want to stay in that loop, that's fine.
Mhm.
It is what it is. And like you said, there may be the occasional lawsuit or, um, God forbid, violence in the workplace where
Mhm.
somebody is so angry because of the
Yeah.
way they've been treated, they show up and start shooting the place up. Um, but there are other options. And it takes a certain amount of humility to recognize what the issue is. And sometimes you can't self-diagnose. And this is where someone such as yourself, or another consultant can come in with, sort of that independent, fresh point of view, to say, here's what I see. Now,
Mhm.
they may disagree, they may agree, they may accept part of a recommendation, but even trying to make some other good faith changes, employees will notice.
Mhm.
They will notice that, yeah, okay, they're trying. As long as they don't just default back to where they were, it's good for 3 months and then it's like, oh yeah, they're back again. Um, they're always watching.
Yes.
And so, that's good news and bad news
Mhm.
because, people in positions of power, what they say and what they do has a tremendous impact, whether they
Mhm.
realize it and intend it to be or not. So to use that power wisely will have great payoff.
Yeah, that independent coming in, which can be someone that you hire, and you could even use your new hires that way. Because, if where you live or where you work, it's like if you live in a place that's musty, you don't notice the smell because you're used to it. Or you could work in a place that smells like cinnamon and honey, right? But you don't notice it because that's your normal. And so for someone to come in and point out the green flags, sometimes I love it when that happens. Like, oh my gosh. I've seen a lot of bad practices. This is a great practice, and I see it on your faces and how you're talking to one another, and they don't know it's unusual because it's their normal. But
Right.
that can be really strong to point that out. And then also the musty part too, like so oh, everything is fine. Like, okay, well, I understand why maybe you don't see this. And so having these outside perspectives, which we can use new hires to kind of, not put them on the spot so that they feel uncomfortable, but if we're willing to learn, and I think a part of it is a problem that I see with just people in general is that most of us are just professionals. We want to show up. We have this view of ourselves that we all have a reason for doing what we're doing. I have yet to meet someone who says, I'm the problem. I'm the one who's causing all the mayhem. No, I have a reason for doing this because this person did this, because I'm not being paid fairly, because. And
Mhm.
their behavior is consistent for them. It makes sense to them. I've not met someone who says, no, I'm here to burn it all down and I'm trying to be an awful person. So if you have a manager who has this vision that I'm a professional, I'm doing all these things, they don't know what I'm doing. And so to be told it's not working can be really hard because they know their intent. And their
Right.
intent is good, but
Yeah.
intent versus impact. Is it really getting at what you want to achieve?
Yeah. And that's where they don't have the self-awareness to recognize, you know, how they're being seen,
Mhm.
and how they're showing up. So, well said.
Do you have any views about, oh my gosh, I see we're out of time. I'm going to ask you this real quick before my last question about 360s, about those kinds of reviews for managers?
360s, it's really interesting. Um, 360s work if there's trust.
Yes.
And, if somebody feels like, well, if I tell you the truth, you're going to blow it up in my face and I'm out the door, then no, I'm going to say, you're such a wonderful manager. I've never seen anybody better than you. I've learned so much. Yeah, learned negative stuff not to do. So I think 360s, it depends who's doing them,
Mhm.
and under what circumstances. But if they're truly anonymous, that's one thing, but that can be rarely the case, especially with computers where you can trace where something came. I remember one time I was asked to, it wasn't a 360, it was just a regular evaluation, and everybody was supposed to do it, but I hate doing those types of questionnaires. And so it's like, oh, you didn't do yours. Oh, I thought they were anonymous. Yeah, gotcha. So, yeah, this is where the honesty comes in and the trust, and it's like, you know, it's really hard to regain once it's lost.
Yeah,
It really, really is. The one weekend retreat isn't going to do it. The fancy lunch at a nice restaurant isn't going to do it. Um, you know, Employees are smarter than that.
yeah.
As like you said at the very beginning, it's the day-to-day things,
Mhm.
very simple day-to-day things. And people don't realize how the messages that they're sending.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we
So
are at work. And so this is not your living room. And so if someone says, tell me what you really think about your boss, right? What is the filtered, appropriate, professional response? And all of that has to take in consideration who is this person and what is the
yeah,
system of these messages? Yeah. I think 360s, if they work, they don't need to be there because things are working well. But yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So they can be kind of a trap.
I agree. Yes. All right. So my last question for you is, as you look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will all workers be treated with dignity and respect, but that they'll be encouraged to thrive and flourish?
I think a good deal of management training. What I'm hearing from colleagues in HR is that people are thrust into management positions uh, before they even have any kind of training. It's this assumption that leaders are born. And maybe some people do have more innate leadership capability than others. But, when we just talked about all of these little nuances and, sort of the messiness of dealing with emotions and especially conflict management, I mean, nobody likes conflict. Um, it's easy to see how things get derailed. And
Mhm.
so, my crystal ball would be, that the more management training and coaching that is available, and even if it's just HR saying, like, we're here for you. Because I mean, I knew one executive vice president who didn't want to go to HR because it would make him look like he was weak. Like,
Mhm.
yes. Do you do your own open heart surgery because it would be weak? No. You go to an expert. These people are experts. They can help you, identify and coach you through sort of, hypothetical conversations. Like, what are you afraid of? That they're going to do this? All right, let's talk about that so
Mhm.
that you're prepared. And they would be prepared for other types of things, meetings with a board of directors. Well, why not this?
Mhm.
Why not this? So use the resources that are available, make them available.
Excellent. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a wonderful conversation.
Oh, you're a lot of fun, Mary. Thank you.
Take care. Hannah, thank you so much for a stimulating conversation. And I'm looking forward to reading your book, which is Seeking Fairness at Work, Cracking the New Code of Greater Employee Engagement, Retention, and Satisfaction. Dear listeners, I encourage you to go get it. It has won a bunch of awards, and I'm not surprised after talking with Hannah. She's obviously fabulous and knows what she's talking about. So I'm really looking forward to reading her work. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back, we have new episodes every Tuesday. If you would like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this podcast, it's much appreciated. If you haven't had a chance to check out my latest book, which is called Winning the Generation Wars at Work, Making Your Age an Asset, it's available on Amazon. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.